Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Mel Ferrin. I am the program coordinator for the Department of Student Engagement and Activities, and I work primarily with our clubs and organizations. I help to oversee them. I work very closely with our new club process. I oversee that, and then I also do some of the marketing for the department. Um, Throughout our department, I am referred to as the Constitution guru for whatever reason, because I just happen to have to read them all the time for what I do. So that's why I'm here today, to really just chat with you all, wonderful advisors, about what our student organizations' constitutions include, what they mean, and how the group should be following them. And if you or they ever have any questions about them, please don't hesitate to reach out to us and we can look them over or chat with you or the group about what it means and what exactly the information that's in the Constitution is telling them to do. So, for a quick overview, right, a constitution is supposed to provide the foundation for the organization. It doesn't really tell you exactly detail by detail what the group has to do, but it provides the bones and the structure for that organization, and guides them in some of the more important, sometimes administrative tasks of leading an organization, such as elections, and what the purpose of the organization is, and all of that good stuff. It clarifies the purpose of the organization. So our constitutions, right in the beginning, we have our organizations provide their statement of purpose on there so that anyone who looks at their group can know what that organization is about and really get a good idea about their mission and their goals. Again, really defining the structure and the functions of the organization. And it's really helpful when conflict arises. So, whenever organizations will come to us and say, hey, someone from our group is not doing what they're supposed to, what can we do? Typically, we'll point them to their constitution. We say, hey, there's an impeachment process if that's the route you choose to go through. But also, have you had a conversation with that person yet? So that we don't have to get to the whole impeachment part of your constitution. So the constitution should be created and it should be followed in order to protect basically all parties in the organization, the executive board, the general members, the advisor, all of that. And at the end of the day, it is kind of a contract, right? It's a contract between the executive board, the general membership, and the university, um, because the organization is providing us with this document that they're saying that they're going to follow. So we will be upholding that, right? So we'll say, well, did you follow your constitution? If not, why? All right. So, what is in the Constitution? There are a few very important parts of the student organization constitutions that I'll touch on. I won't go into the nitty gritty details about what it's supposed to say or what um, is supposed to be in it or how it can be changed, but I will go into why it matters and what the group should be doing for that specific section. Oh, there we go. So the first part, like I mentioned, is the purpose, right? We ask them, what is the statement of purpose for your organization? And this statement of purpose has to be clear and representative of the organization. We usually don't prefer them to be too broad or too detailed. Definitely never want them to have any specific information with dates or anything like that, because it really outdates the Constitution very quickly, and then they would have to go in and change it. But the purpose statement, right? I should be able to read it and know exactly what your group is about. And that is how organizations get recognized. So their statement of purpose is one of the things that we look for to make sure that they're not duplicative of any other organization that we already have on campus. So all of our organizations, one of the parts that we look for again is the statement of purpose to make sure that they are new and exciting and providing a service to our students that we don't already provide. So, again, the purpose statement should really guide the organization and its missions and its goals. And it should match the current state of the group, right? We have some organizations that have been here for a very long time, and maybe they started out being one thing, but they have evolved and shifted to do and be something else. And sometimes we find that the statement of purpose is really outdated to what the group is actually doing now. And in those cases, we really encourage them to revisit their statement of purpose and modify it so that it makes sense for what the group is doing now. Because if I am joining the, I don't know, the writing club, but now we're no longer doing writing, we're doing reading. That's a weird example, but then I would be a little thrown off, right? About, well, you said that you're doing one thing, but you're actually doing another. So for our organizations that have shifted and evolved, we really do encourage them to take a look at their statement of purpose and make sure that it still matches and is still representative of who they are at their core. The next part is membership. So this dictates how any student can become a member of the organization. And it also dictates what will constitute as active membership, which is an active member will have voting rights. So our organizations, most of them, will have something in their membership that says you become an active member after attending 10 general body meetings, or after obtaining 10 points in this point system that we have by attending meetings and doing other small projects here and there. Very few of our groups have what we call selective membership, which means that there is sort of a higher barrier for membership into the organization, whether that is sort of a GPA that they have to meet or whether they have to apply to be part of that group, right? So very few of our groups have that. A lot of our performance groups will have that, right? They have tryouts, but we really encourage our groups to be as open as they can be to make sure that they're accessible to all of our student body, especially our groups who are getting funding from like USG and stuff. We want to make sure that those groups in particular are accessible because they would be using student activity fee money. In the membership, we also talk about quorum, and quorum of active members is what's necessary for voting. So quorum is the minimum threshold of active members that need to be present whenever they're voting on elections, on amendments, really on anything. So we always encourage our groups to make sure that their rosters are up to date and they know who their active members are so that they can say, okay, we have an election coming up next week. We need at least 16 people, right, to be here to meet our quorum in order to make a vote pass. So then we have the structure, right? And the structure is the executive board and anything below that. So it typically begins with the executive board, which for us, we consider the executive board the president, the vice president, the secretary, treasurer, and then for our purposes, the event coordinator. However, only the core four, so president, vice president, treasurer, and secretary, have to adhere to the university like minimum requirements for executive board membership, which is they have to be a matriculated student, they have to have a 2.25 GPA for undergraduates, 2.5 for fraternity and sorority life groups, and 3.0 for graduate students. And I think there's another one that I can't quite remember right now. But the event coordinator is a position where they don't necessarily need to meet those thresholds, which is a really great way for students who might not meet, right, the GPA requirement to still have a leadership position within the organization. So again, creating access to different experiences and opportunities. Within this section of the Constitution, we want to make sure that the roles are clearly defined and they provide guidance for those in the leadership position. So what is the president supposed to do? What is the vice president supposed to do, right? Executive board members and students, as they're getting elected, should be aware of what's required of them before, right? So some of our organizations will say that the president needs to talk to all external like affiliation people. So someone needs to know that that is part of their duties. Right? The event coordinator may be required to coordinate 2 events per semester, right? So our students need to know that what is required of them before accepting these positions. Otherwise, that's sort of when that conflict can arise, where there might be miscommunication about who does what. After that, we have elections, which is a really important part of the Constitution and probably what we get the most questions on. Our students will always ask us, okay, spring semester's ending, how do I do my elections? And 99% of the time, our answer is, I don't know, what does your constitution say? So they have to abide by their constitution when they're holding their elections. So that section really provides guidance to the group in how they're supposed to elect their new executive board members for the upcoming year. That section is going to include information on when elections happen, right? Most of our groups say elections need to happen by May 1st or the last week of the semester. There will be some form of information as to when these elections need to happen. There will be information on who can be elected, right? A lot of them will say only people who have been an active member for 2 semesters can run for these positions. Also, how voting happens. So again, we must meet a quorum of 51% or the majority of our active membership in order to hold a vote and stuff like that. And also when those who are elected begin their position. So there is a section in there that will say, elections are held no later than May 1st. New officers will take their role on May 15th after a 2-week transition period. So this part of the Constitution will really delineate the election process. And if there's any questions about it, based on what the information is, definitely encourage your group to reach out to us, or you can also support them in figuring out what that means for them. I will say for elections, there's always questions as to, does it have to be in person? Can it be online? And for us, I don't believe that is an issue if they have to do it online, especially right now. We just want to make sure that they are keeping anonymity and following the Constitution for who can run for the e-board positions and how voting happens and who gets elected, like by majority vote, by a 2/3 vote, whatever it says in their Constitution. Impeachment, like I mentioned earlier, is also part of a constitution. So if the conflict just arises where, conversations have happened with a student who is not meeting the criteria to be in the executive board, right? They're being a detriment to the organization. They're not doing their work, all of that, conversations have happened. Students can go through an impeachment process by following their constitution. But we also want to make sure that the process is fair and contains checks and balances. So I have received some constitutions where it's just, if someone is accused of something, they lose all their privileges until whatever, a vote is held or whatever. And for me, it's a conversation of, okay, well, just because, right, you can be accused of something does not mean that you necessarily are found to have actually done that or that a vote will pass. So what is the point of losing all your privileges or getting kicked out of the group before you're really able to have a fair vote and really be able to speak your part? So making sure that there's checks and balances in the process. Most of our groups will follow our model constitution impeachment process, and many of them don't have to use it most of the time, which is really great. We always recommend conflict resolution that doesn't lead to the impeachment portion if possible. So someone stepping down or someone really being like, hey, sorry, I've had a rough couple of weeks, but I'll get on it. So if we can avoid impeachment, that's great. If not, there is information on how to follow that. This section also includes information on special elections, right? So if someone does happen to get impeached, or if someone steps down for whatever reason, someone graduates, there is information on what happens when you need to fill a position outside of the normal election process. Then we have amendments. So again, amendments really help to manage the organization as it grows and changes. You can amend your statement of purpose. You can amend almost all of the different sections that we've chatted about today. I will say that in our model constitution, we have information about what can't be changed within the Constitution, right? So in the membership section, there is a whole piece about membership being open to students regardless of sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, right? All of these protected classes. That can't change, right? You can't change that. That is a university policy. So all of that is delineated within our model constitution if you're ever interested in knowing that. But students are able to change some things again, like their statement of purpose. They can change the executive board positions and what each position does. If you ever have questions about what can and can't be changed, definitely just let us know. But amendments can basically be made at any time as long as they are following that amendment section. So I think you have to submit in writing to the secretary at least 5 days before the meeting so that everyone has time to see the changes that are proposed, and then it goes up to a vote. Again, making sure that the group, the general body membership, is really aware of the changes that are being made to the Constitution, because at the end of the day, it affects them as well as the executive board. So what happens when an organization changes their constitution through the amendment process? Change is good, right? And like I said, they can be made at any time as long as the executive board and the general body approve those changes, right? They're all on board. And then once those changes have been approved, we ask that the Constitution is emailed to us at the Department of Student Engagement and Activities. We'll just take a look at it to make sure that it still meets all of our required guidelines and processes. And then it just needs to get uploaded to their SB Engage page so that anyone who's looking for that organization has access to that document. Constitutions are available and viewable by the public under the organizations page. So anyone who's interested in the organization can take a look at what their constitution says. And once a vote has been approved, the organization should be following that constitution as soon as it's approved. We also recommend them taking minutes when they're doing any sort of vote, but especially any amendment or election process for historical records, right? So that e-boards 3 years from now can know what was changed back, I guess now, and really keep that information flowing from one executive board to another. That's really all the content that I wanted to cover, but I do want to open it up to questions. If you all have any questions about your organizations, how to support them in following or maybe changing their constitution, or really anything that you might want to chat about at this point.
I'll just ask one question. Whose responsibility ultimately should it be, or who should have the responsibility of making sure that the group does follow the Constitution? Is that an officer within the group or the advisor, or?
I mean, at the end of the day, it should be the executive board members holding each other accountable for following their constitution. I think the advisor can definitely play a role, especially for some bigger stuff, right? Elections, making sure that that the right people are running for the right positions and whatnot. But at the end of the day, the students have to hold each other accountable, and making sure that they're running as they should be based on their constitution. We do know that some of them don't follow their constitution, and that's usually when issues arise, right?
Right.
So encouraging them to do so as much as possible would be great.
Thank you.
Of course.
I guess I have a question about the section where it talks about assets if the club dissolves. So
yes, so that is the last part of the Constitution. We call it our dissolution clause, and there's typically 3 options. There's one option where their assets go to the undergraduate student government, typically because they are funded by the undergraduate student government. There's one where it goes to the graduate student organization because it's a graduate organization funded by that group. And then there's a third one for our non-funded organizations where it goes into what's called an FSA or TNA account. So our unfunded organizations, we always encourage them to open an FSA account, which is an organizational account ran by the Faculty Student Association, which allows them to use their org funds, right, for the group. Because what we find is that a lot of times unfunded organizations, they'll open up a bank account in one individual's name, which can cause a lot of issues on their taxes, their financial aid, right? There's nothing saying that if I open up a bank account under my name for my organization. I can't just leave tomorrow and take all the money we fundraised, right? So we definitely discourage any personal accounts and encourage the FSA or TNA accounts. So those are the three options, Isabel. Did you have questions about a specific?
Well, no, so a lot of the media organizations are funded different than those three scenarios. So a few of our constitutions say in the event of the dissolution of the club, assets return to whoever the funding organization is. So
So for your organizations, right, is there typically, would they know, is it one organization that funds them or is it multiple?
it's multiple depending on the group. So some are incorporated as their own corporation. So the funds go through their incorporation while they also get money from the undergraduate student government. Some get money from the Stony Brook Foundation account they have. Some have FSA accounts. So they all have a variety of ways that they're funded. And some groups are funded in more than one way. So they don't, so all their money doesn't come from USG or, or they may get money from USG and buy equipment with that and money from their foundation account and use that for operations expenses. So the basic clause is that in the event there's a dissolution of the club, the funding and assets resort back to whoever the funding organization was.
Gotcha. I think we usually stay away from that only because our issue is that, let's say I have 3 different people giving me money, right? And they each gave me different amounts of money. But if I'm spending, let's say $300, then how does that get split up if I dissolve, right? Who gets what money back?
Well, there's inventory. We have inventories that are kept.
But would you know where the money is being spent from each organization, I guess is the question. Or does it go into like one communal account?
No, they were all separate accounts.
Okay, gotcha.
So if I just use the radio station, for example, so if assets were purchased with USG money, those assets would go back to USG. The assets that were purchased with that money would go back to USG. It's not going to be dissolved, but those assets, and if there was equipment bought with foundation money, those assets would go back to the foundation. And there's inventory kept to show what was purchased with which funds.
Yeah.
Liz is raising her hand because she helps me do the inventory.
Yeah, I do the inventory. So I have the asset and the inventory list. So we know, what belongs to us as the undergraduate student government. So we would just take back those assets or inventory items. We just had a club, actually.
Yeah, the only one that's actually happened that was our media club was SBU TV years ago.
Yeah.
And so all the physical purchased assets, hard assets, were reverted back to USG.
Right. I think because our media groups are definitely one of those organization types that are a little more intricate. So I would love to have a conversation with Melissa and whatnot to make sure that their dissolution clauses on their constitution are just very specific to what exactly is supposed to happen in the event, hopefully it never happens, that they would have to dissolve, just so that there's no gray area if it were ever to happen,
Thank you.
Of course. Other questions? Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Like I said, if you have any questions, definitely shoot us an email, shoot Melissa an email as well. We're here, or just send your group over to us. But we'll also send this information out, the recording and whatnot if you wanted it. But I'll stick around if anything pops into your head. Otherwise, thank you for joining.
Thank you, Mel.
Of course.
Thank you.
Good weekend, everyone.
Thank you. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks.
I'm just going to stay here so I can stare at the two of you.